My name is Seraphina Thorne, and I am 22 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood on a massive graduation stage overlooking a sea of 5 in 500 people. In the very first row sat my parents, Julian and Lydia. Their faces were completely drained of color, looking as though they had just seen a ghost. They hadn't come to see me. They were there to celebrate my twin sister, Giselle, as she completed her degree at an elite private university. They didn't even know I was enrolled at the same institution, let alone that I would be the one standing at the mahogany podium, wearing the gold sash of the valedictorian, preparing to deliver the keynote address to the entire graduating class. But to understand the look of pure shock on their faces, we have to go back 4 years. We have to go back to a humid Tuesday evening in the summer of 2021, in a living room that smelled of expensive leather and corporate success, where my father sat me down and changed the trajectory of my life with a single, cold calculation. Before I tell you what he said, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own home? Like you were being measured by a yardstick you never asked for? If you have, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I truly believe that sharing these stories helps us realize we aren't as alone as we feel. In April 2021, the acceptance letters arrived. Giselle got into Oak Ridge Academy, a prestigious private school with a staggering price tag of $82,000 USD per year. I got into Stonebridge State, a highly respected public university. The tuition there was $31,000 USD annually. Not cheap, but significantly more affordable than Oak Ridge. That evening, my father, Julian, called a family meeting. He sat in his oversized armchair, looking less like a father and more like a CEO addressing a board of disgruntled shareholders. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap, while Giselle stood by the window, already glowing with the smug satisfaction of someone who knew she had already won. Julian cleared his throat. Giselle, he began, we have reviewed the numbers. Your mother and I will be covering your full tuition at Oak Ridge. Housing, meal plans, books, everything. We want you focused entirely on your networking and your future. Giselle let out a squeal of joy and immediately began typing on her phone, likely updating her social media status. Then my father turned his gaze toward me. His eyes were flat, devoid of the warmth he had just shown my sister. Seraphina, he said, his voice level and clinical, we have decided not to fund your education at Stonebridge State. The room went silent. I felt the air leave my lungs. I'm sorry? I managed to whisper. My father leaned forward. It's a matter of pragmatism, Seraphina. Giselle has a specific kind of social capital. She has leadership potential. She builds high-value connections, and she will likely marry into a family that expands our own influence. Funding her is an investment that makes financial sense. He paused, and the next words felt like a physical blow to my chest. You are smart, Seraphina, but you are not special. You lack that certain spark that leads to a high yield. From a business perspective, there is simply no return on investment with you. You are a stagnant asset. I looked at my mother, desperate for a defense, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the rug. I looked at Giselle, who didn't even look up from her screen. So I'm just supposed to figure it out myself? I asked, my voice trembling. Julian shrugged, a gesture so dismissive it felt like a door slamming shut. You've always been the practical one. You'll manage. That night, I didn't cry. I had spent years crying over the subtle and not so subtle ways they chose her over me. This wasn't a new pattern. It was just the final, definitive stroke. The favoritism was woven into the very fabric of our lives. When we turned 17, Giselle was gifted a brand new Audi with a white bow. I was handed her old, battered tablet, the one with a spiderweb crack across the screen and a battery that died after 20 minutes of use. We can't justify 2 car payments right now, my mother had said, while simultaneously booking Giselle's $12,000 USD summer internship program in Paris. In every family photo, Giselle was the centerpiece, bathed in light, while I was often pushed to the far edge, sometimes even partially cropped out of the frame. I was the afterthought, the safe child, the one who didn't need anything because I never complained. But sitting in my room that night, staring at my cracked tablet, something shifted inside me. The hurt didn't vanish, but it hardened into a cold, diamond-sharp resolve. My father saw me as a bad investment? Fine. I would prove to him that I was the only investment that ever truly mattered. I opened a spreadsheet. 31,000 USD a year, 124,000 USDs for a 4-year degree. My total savings from 3 years of part-time tutoring and waitressing was exactly 3,200 USD. The gap was a mountain I couldn't see the top of. If I couldn't find a way to pay, I would become exactly what my father predicted. The twin who stayed behind, the one who worked a dead-end job while Giselle moved in circles of gold and prestige. I could already hear the pity in my mother's voice at future holiday dinners. Oh, Seraphina is doing fine. She's just taking a more modest path. I refused to let that be my story. I spent the rest of that night until the sun began to peek through the blinds, searching for every loophole, every obscure grant, and every merit-based scholarship available for students who had been left to fend for themselves. I didn't want their money anymore. I wanted my freedom. And little did my father know, his decision to cut me off was the very thing that would eventually lead me to that stage. 3 weeks ago, watching him realize that the asset he labeled as stagnant had just become the most valuable person in the room. What would you do if your parents told you that you weren't worth the investment? Would you try to win them over, or would you walk away and build your own empire? Type strength in the comments if you would choose to fight for yourself. I'm reading all your comments, and your perspectives mean the world to me. Stay tuned for part 2, where I'll show you exactly how I survived the first year on 3 hours of sleep, and the moment I met the woman who would change my life forever. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the climax of this journey. You don't just wake up one day and become a stagnant asset in the eyes of your parents. That kind of label is earned through years of carefully woven favoritism, a pattern of behavior so subtle yet so consistent that you start to wonder if you are the one who is crazy. As I sat in my room that night, staring at the acceptance letter from Stonebridge State that my father refused to fund, I realized the decision wasn't about the 31,000 USD. It was the final, ugly stitch in a pattern that had been part of our family fabric for as long as I could remember. In our house, there was a Giselle standard and a Seraphina standard. When we turned 16, it was the most vivid example. I remember the morning clearly. We were led into the driveway with our eyes covered. My heart was pounding. I thought, for just 1 second, that maybe this would be the day we were treated as equals. When the blindfolds came off, there was a brand new, metallic white Audi with a massive red bow on the hood. Giselle screamed and hugged my father. I looked around, waiting for the second car. It never came. Instead, my mother, Lydia, handed me a small wrap box. Inside was Giselle's old tablet, the one she had dropped the year before. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, and the battery would die after exactly 40 minutes of use. "We can't afford 2 car payments right now, sweetheart," my mother had said, her voice dripping with that artificial sweetness she used whenever she was lying. Besides, Giselle has so many extracurriculars. You're always so happy to just stay home and study. You'll make better use of this for your homework. That was the logic of our house. Giselle needed the world because she was meant to conquer it. I was given the scraps because I was expected to just exist in her shadow. Does this sound familiar to any of you? Have you ever had a sibling get the shiny new toy while you were told to be grateful for the leftovers? If so, comment the word "same" down below. I want to see how many of us have lived through this silent competition. The discrimination wasn't just in the big gifts. It was in the visual history of our family. If you looked at the gallery wall in our hallway, you would see a beautiful timeline of Giselle's life. Giselle at ballet, Giselle winning the debate trophy, Giselle at her prom, in a 29,500 USD designer gown. I was there too, technically. But if you look closely at the photos from our family vacations to the Alps or Spain, I was always at the very edge of the frame. In one photo from our trip to Ibiza, I was actually partially cropped out, leaving only my shoulder and a bit of my hair visible next to my father's beaming face. I was an afterthought, a background character in the movie of Giselle's life. During those vacations, the gap was even more humiliating. Giselle always got her own hotel room with an ocean view. My parents would claim the hotel was overbooked and tell me I would be more comfortable on a pull-out couch in the hallway. One year, at a luxury resort, they actually had me sleep in a walk-in closet. My mother called it a cozy nook. I called it a reminder of exactly where I ranked in their hierarchy. When I was 17, I tried to confront my mother about it. I asked her why Giselle got the summer abroad in Italy while I was told to find a local job to pay for my own school clothes. She just sighed and looked at me with pity. Seraphina, you're imagining things. We love you both the same. It's just that Giselle has a certain presence. She needs these opportunities to shine. A few months later, I found out what they really thought. My mother had left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while she was in the garden. A notification popped up, a text from my Aunt Linda. I shouldn't have looked, but my gut told me I needed to. Poor Seraphina, my mother had written. But Julian is right. She just doesn't stand out. We have to be practical with our resources. It's better to put everything behind Giselle. She's the one who will carry the family name forward. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. I wasn't just imagining it. My lack of value was a calculated family policy. But the ultimate betrayal happened during our freshman year of college. Since my parents refused to pay for Stonebridge, I was working 3 jobs. I was a barista at 5 a.m., a library cleaner on weekends, and a teaching assistant in the evenings. I was exhausted, living on instant ramen and 4 hours of sleep. Thanksgiving came around. I couldn't afford the flight home, and my parents didn't offer to buy me a ticket. On Thanksgiving Day, I sat alone in my $350 USD a month rented room, eating a bowl of noodles and staring at a textbook I had to borrow from the library because I couldn't afford to buy it. I called home, hoping for a moment of connection. My mother answered, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses loud in the background. "Hi, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Seraphina. Happy Thanksgiving, honey. We're just about to sit down for dinner. Giselle is telling the most hilarious story about her new sorority sisters. Is Dad there?" I asked. "Can I talk to him?" There was a pause. I heard a muffled voice in the background, my father's voice. "Tell her I'm busy with the turkey," he said. My mother came back on the line, her voice artificially bright. "Your father is just in the middle of carving, sweetie. Are you eating well? Do you need anything?" I looked at my bowl of ramen. "No, Mom, I don't need anything." After I hung up, I opened Facebook. The first thing I saw was a photo Giselle had just posted. It was a picture of the dining table. The candles were lit, the turkey was gleaming, and my parents were smiling at Giselle. The caption read, "Thankful for my amazing family." I zoomed in on the photo. I counted the place settings. 1, 2, 3, 3 chairs. Not 4. They hadn't even set a place for me. They hadn't even pretended that I was missing. In their world, the family was already complete without me. Something broke inside me that night. But it wasn't the kind of break that makes you fall apart. It was the kind of break that sets you free. The ache I had carried for years, the desperate longing for my father to look at me and see someone special, for my mother to defend me. It didn't disappear, but it went quiet. I realized that night that I was never going to win a seat at that table by asking for it. If I wanted a seat, I would have to build my own table. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed how you saw your family forever? Or have you ever been the one left out of a holiday celebration? Tell me your story in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and I want us to support each other. I went back to my laptop, the one with the cracked screen and the dying battery. I didn't look for plane tickets home. I didn't look for sympathy. I typed 4 words into the search bar: full scholarships, independent students. My father thought I was a bad investment. My mother thought I didn't stand out. They were about to find out that the person they tried to crop out of their lives was the only one who actually knew how to build a future from nothing. If you're ready to see how I went from that bowl of ramen to the valedictorian stage, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. In part 3, I'm going to show you the brutal 4 a.m. schedule that nearly broke me, and the meeting with a legendary professor that changed my life forever. You won't want to miss what happens when the stagnant asset starts to rise. That Thanksgiving night, staring at the photo of my family's 3-person dinner, was the moment the old Seraphina Thorne died. The girl who spent years begging for a scrap of her father's attention was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, someone fueled by a cold, quiet necessity. My father, Julian, had called me a stagnant asset. He told me that investing in my education at Stonebridge State was a financial mistake. If I wanted to prove him wrong, I couldn't just be a student. I had to become a machine. To bridge the gap from my 31,000 USD annual tuition, I didn't just need a job. I needed a miracle. That summer, I filled an entire notebook with frantic calculations. My savings stood at a measly 3,200 USD. Even with a student loan, the interest would swallow me whole if I didn't work. So I built a schedule that most people would call a prison sentence. But for me, it was the only way to buy my freedom. Job number 1 was at the Early Bean, a campus-adjacent coffee shop. My shift started at 4:30 a.m. Every morning, while the rest of the world, including Giselle, was wrapped in expensive linens, I was steaming milk and scrubbing espresso stains. I made 900 USD a month there, mostly because I volunteered for every holiday and every double shift. Job number 2 was the one that truly tested my pride. I joined the night shift janitorial crew for the university's athletic complex. From 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. on weekdays and all day Sunday, I scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans. It paid 500 USD a month. There is a specific kind of humility you learn when you are mopping the locker room floor while hearing the cheers of a crowd for a game you don't have time to watch. Job number 3 was the only one that fed my soul. I became a teaching assistant for the statistics department. It only paid 400 USD a month, but it kept my brain sharp. Total monthly income, 1,800 USD. Total sleep, 4 hours a night. I found the cheapest housing possible, a 400 USD basement unit in a house shared with 5 other people. My room was essentially a converted walk-in closet with no window and a radiator that clanked like a dying engine all night long. I didn't have a bed frame. My mattress sat directly on the cold linoleum floor. I didn't have a desk. I used a discarded wooden crate I found behind a grocery store. Before I dive into the reality of that first semester, I have to ask, have you ever had to work a job that felt beneath you just to survive? Or have you ever sacrificed sleep for a dream no one else believed in? Type the grind in the comments if you know what it's like to hustle in the dark. Your stories of resilience are exactly why I'm sharing mine. Life became a blur of caffeine and textbooks. My day began when the world was still black. I'd walk 20 minutes to the cafe in the freezing morning air, my breath blooming in front of me like a ghost. By 9 a.m., my hands would be shaking from the espresso and the cold, but I'd head straight to my first lecture. The hardest part wasn't the work. It was the social isolation. Stonebridge was a state school, but it was still full of students whose parents paid for their meal plans and their weekend trips. I would stand behind the counter at the cafe and serve students who looked exactly like my sister. They wore 200 USD sneakers and complained about their parents only giving them 500 USD for weekend spending. They would look right through me, just as my father did. To them, I was just the girl who made their lattes. They had no idea I was sitting in the same advanced macroeconomics class as them, usually outscoring them on every exam. I lived on instant noodles and 1 USD frozen vegetables. I wore the same 2 pairs of thrift store jeans and a faded hoodie every single day. I couldn't afford a haircut, so I hacked at my own split ends with kitchen scissors in the shared bathroom. Meanwhile, my social media feed was a constant assault. Giselle was thriving at Oak Ridge Academy. She posted photos from a 15,000 USD skiing trip in Aspen that my parents had funded as a winter break treat. She wore a new designer coat in every picture. In one post, she was laughing with my mother, the caption reading, "Best weekend ever with my favorite person." I stared at that photo while sitting on my basement floor, my hands red and raw from the cleaning chemicals I used at my janitorial job. The contrast was so sharp, it felt like a physical weight on my chest. They were living in a world of silk and champagne, while I was literally scrubbing the dirt off the floor. Does it ever feel like the world is split in two, and you're on the wrong side of the glass? If you've ever felt that sting of watching someone else get the easy path while you're climbing a mountain, hit that like button. Let's show the world that the hard path creates stronger people. There were moments I almost broke. One night in November, during my sophomore year, I was mopping the hallway of the library at 11:30 p.m. I was so exhausted I started to hallucinate. I thought I saw my father standing at the end of the hall, looking at me with that same disappointed sneer. I slipped on the wet floor and went down hard. I stayed there, lying on the cold tiles, the smell of bleach filling my lungs. I just wanted to close my eyes and never wake up. I thought about calling them. I thought about saying, "You were right. I'm not special. I can't do this. Please just help me." But then I remembered the empty chair at the Thanksgiving table. I remembered my father's voice calling me a stagnant asset. If I quit now, I would prove him right for the rest of my life. I would be the failure twin forever. I forced myself up. I finished the floor. I walked home in the rain, went into my windowless room, and studied for my midterm until 3 a.m. I was paying the price of freedom. Every hour of sleep I lost was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and their judgment. I didn't need their 72,000 USD private school. I didn't need their Audi. I was building something they couldn't buy, a spine made of steel. What I didn't know was that my grueling schedule was about to catch the eye of someone who actually understood the value of an investment. Someone who didn't care about my social capital or my connections, but saw the raw, terrifying power of my work ethic. In part 4, I'm going to introduce you to the professor who changed everything. She was the first person in 20 years to look at me and see something my parents never could. And she's the reason that, 2 years later, my father's jaw would hit the floor in front of 4,000 people. Are you enjoying the journey so far? If this story is giving you the motivation to keep going with your own goals, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. In the next part, the tide finally starts to turn, and the stagnant asset begins to show her true worth. See you in the next one. By the start of my second semester at Stonebridge State, I was a ghost haunting my own life. The brutal rhythm I described in the previous part, the 4 a.m. wake-up calls, the smell of burnt espresso, the back-breaking labor of scrubbing library floors, and the endless haze of sleep deprivation had become my entire reality. I was functioning on exactly 4 hours of sleep a night. My hands were constantly stained with cleaning chemicals, and my weight had dropped because instant noodles aren't exactly a balanced diet. I was invisible. To my parents, I was a stagnant asset they had successfully liquidated from their lives. To my sister Giselle, I was a distant memory of a girl who couldn't keep up. But in the crowded lecture halls of Stonebridge, I found a different kind of sanctuary. It was a Tuesday morning when I walked into Microeconomics 101. The professor was Dr. Margaret Smith. In the world of academia, her name was spoken with a mixture of reverence and pure terror. She had been teaching for over 30 years, published in every major economic journal, and had a reputation for being impossible to please. The campus rumor was that she hadn't given an A+ in over 5 years. I sat in the third row, tucked into the same seat I always took. I was wearing my faded thrift store hoodie, my hair pulled back in a messy knot because I hadn't had time to wash it after my janitorial shift. I looked like a tired kid who was barely hanging on, but my notebook told a different story. My notes were meticulous, a map of economic theories that I used to distract myself from the hunger in my stomach. For our first major essay, we had to analyze market failures and the misallocation of resources. It was a topic I knew intimately, though not in the way the textbook described. I wrote that paper at 2 a.m. on my basement floor, fueled by a 1 USD energy drink and a burning sense of injustice. I didn't expect an A. I expected a B- at best. I just wanted to survive the class. Before I tell you what happened when she handed those papers back, I want to check in with you. Have you ever had that one teacher or mentor who saw through your exhaustion and recognized your potential? That one person who didn't look at your clothes or your bank account, but at your mind? If you have, please comment the word mentor below and tell me how they changed your life. It is so important to acknowledge the people who give us a chance when the rest of the world is looking away. When Dr. Smith began returning our essays, the room was thick with anxiety. Most students were getting C's and D's. When she reached my row, She didn't just hand me my paper. She set it down face down and looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses. At the top of my page, in sharp red ink, were two letters that felt like a lightning bolt. A+. Underneath, she had written 3 words. See me after class. My heart dropped into my stomach. I spent the rest of the lecture convinced I was in trouble. Maybe she thought I had plagiarized. Maybe she thought someone like me, the girl who smelled like floor wax, couldn't possibly write like that. When the hall cleared, I approached her desk with my head down. Dr. Smith was packing her bag, her silver hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She looked up and pointed to a chair. Sit down, Seraphina, she said. I sat, clutching my backpack. Did I do something wrong, Dr. Smith? I asked, my voice trembling. She leaned forward, her gaze intense. This essay is one of the most sophisticated pieces of undergraduate writing I have seen in 2 decades. Your analysis of resource misallocation isn't just academic, it feels personal. Tell me, where did you study before this? I hesitated. Nowhere special, just a public high school. I don't have a tutor or anything. And your family? She asked. Are they academics? I felt a lump form in my throat. My family doesn't support my education, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Financially or otherwise. They don't even know I'm still in school, really. Doctor, Smith set down her pen and truly looked at me. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing the real Seraphina Thorne, not the crop-out version. Tell me everything, she commanded. And so, I did. I told her about the $82,000 USD tuition my parents were paying for Giselle. I told her about the Audi and the designer dresses. I told her about the 3 jobs, the 4 a.m. shifts at the cafe, the janitorial work, and the basement room with no windows. I told her that my father called me a bad investment. When I finished, the office was silent. Dr. Smith didn't offer me a tissue or tell me she was sorry. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Have you heard of the Summit Fellowship? She asked. I nodded slowly. I've seen it online, but that's for the elite. Only 20 students nationwide are selected. It's a full ride, tuition, housing, and a $10,000 USD annual stipend. Dr. Smith leaned in, her eyes gleaming with a fierce kind of pride. It is for students with extraordinary potential and the resilience to match. Seraphina, potential means absolutely nothing if no one sees it. I see you, and I am going to make sure the rest of the world sees you too. She told me that recipients of the Summit Fellowship at partner schools aren't just scholars. They are given the highest honor. They are invited to deliver the commencement address at their graduation. My breath caught in my throat. I thought about my father sitting in the audience for Giselle. I thought about him hearing my name and my voice after 4 years of silence. You have a 4.0 GPA while working 60 hours a week, Dr. Smith continued. You are the personification of what this fellowship represents. We are going to apply, and we are going to win. That meeting changed my trajectory forever. For the next 2 years, my life remained a relentless rhythm of work and study, but the quiet emptiness inside me was being filled with a new, dangerous ambition. I wasn't just working to survive anymore. I was working to ascend. I missed every party. I missed every football game. While other students were building memories, I was building a resume that was bulletproof. There were nights I fainted from exhaustion at the cafe. There were nights I sat in a borrowed car and cried until I couldn't breathe. But every time I felt like quitting, I remembered Dr. Smith's words. I see you. If you are enjoying this journey of resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me reach more people who might be going through the same struggle. In Part 5, I'm going to take you inside the high-stakes interview in New York City, where I had to face a panel of the country's most powerful people while wearing a 15 USD thrift store blazer. And I'll show you the moment the email arrived, the one that changed my life and set the stage for the most satisfying confrontation you've ever heard. You don't want to miss the climax of the Summit Fellowship battle. See you in the next one. The email arrived at exactly 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in September of my senior year. I remember the subject line as if it were etched into my soul. Summit Foundation Final Round Notification. My hands were shaking so violently that I nearly dropped my cracked tablet, the one my parents had given me as a hand-me-down years ago. Out of hundreds of applicants, I had been selected as one of the few finalists, but the final round was an in-person interview at their headquarters in New York City, over 800 miles away from Stonebridge State. I checked my bank account immediately. I had exactly 847 USD. A last-minute flight would cost at least 400 USD, and a hotel would eat the rest of my savings right when my rent was due in 2 weeks. I was about to close my laptop and give up when my roommate, Rebecca, walked in. She saw the email and literally screamed with joy. When I told her I couldn't afford the trip, she grabbed my shoulders and said, "Frankie, this is your shot. You don't get another one." She lent me the money for a 53 USD bus ticket that left Thursday night and arrived Friday morning. I took that 8-hour overnight bus, arriving in Manhattan at 5 a.m. with a stiff neck and wearing a borrowed blazer from a thrift store. The waiting room at the foundation was full of polished candidates with designer bags and hovering parents who radiated easy confidence. I looked down at my scuffed shoes and felt like I didn't belong. But then I remembered the words of Dr. Margaret Smith. You don't need to belong. You need to show them you deserve to. 2 weeks after that nerve-wracking interview, I was walking to my morning shift at the cafe when my phone buzzed. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, a cyclist swerving around me and cursing, but I didn't hear him. I opened the email. Dear Miss Thorne, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Summit Fellow for the class of 2025. I read it 4 times. Then I sat down right there on the curb and cried. Not quiet, pretty tears, but ugly, heaving sobs. 3 years of exhaustion, of living in a windowless basement, of working 3 jobs, and being treated like a ghost by my own family, all poured out of me on that sidewalk. I was now a Summit Fellow, full tuition covered, a 10,000 USD annual stipend, and most importantly, the right to transfer to any partner university in their network. That night, Dr. Smith called me personally. She told me that Oak Ridge Academy, the elite school my sister Giselle attended, was on the partner list. She also told me that as a Summit Fellow at Oak Ridge, I would graduate with top honors and be the one to deliver the commencement speech as valedictorian. I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever worked twice as hard for half the recognition, or if you've ever had a victory that no one in your family celebrated, type the word deserve in the comments. I read every single one of your stories, and seeing your resilience gives me so much strength. I made my decision that night and told no one in my family. I transferred to Oak Ridge Academy for my final semester. 3 weeks into the term, it finally happened. I was in the library, tucked into a corner with my constitutional law textbook, when I heard a voice that made my stomach drop. Oh my God, Seraphina? I looked up. Giselle stood 3 feet away, a half-empty iced latte in her hand and her mouth hanging open. She looked at me like I had materialized from thin air. She asked how I was there, since our parents weren't paying for me. I paid for it myself, I told her calmly. I transferred on a scholarship. Giselle's expression shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like shame. She asked why I hadn't told anyone, and for the first time, I confronted her. I asked her if she had ever once asked, in 4 years, how I was surviving while she was on ski trips and vacations. She had no answer. When she asked if I hated the family, I looked her in the eye and said, "No, you can't hate people you've stopped caring about." That night, my phone lit up with missed calls from Julian and Lydia, my father and mother. I silenced them all. Julian called again the next morning, claiming he cared because I was his daughter. I reminded him of that night in the living room when he said I wasn't worth the investment. He went silent. He told me we would discuss it in person at graduation, since they were already coming for Giselle. Graduation morning, May 17th, was a perfect blue sky day. The stadium was packed with 4,000 people. I arrived early, slipping in through the faculty entrance. While the other graduates wore standard black gowns, I had the gold sash of the valedictorian draped across my shoulders and the Summit Fellow medallion pinned to my chest. In the front row, dead center, sat my parents. My father had his expensive camera ready for Giselle's moment. My mother held a massive bouquet of roses. They looked so proud, so happy, and so completely unaware. Then, the university president returned to the podium, and now it is my great honor to introduce this year's valedictorian and Summit Fellow. Please join me in welcoming Seraphina Thorne. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then I stood up. I walked toward the podium, my heels clicking against the stage, the gold sash swaying with every step. I watched my parents' faces transform in real time. My father's hand froze on his camera. My mother's bouquet slipped sideways. It was a pale, stricken silence. They weren't looking at Giselle anymore. For the first time in my life, they were really looking at me. I adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice steady and calm. 4 years ago, I was told I wasn't worth the investment. The stadium went silent as I spoke about the 3 jobs, the 4 hours of sleep, and the windowless basement. I told them that the greatest gift I ever received wasn't financial support, but the chance to discover who I am without anyone's validation. In the front row, my mother was crying, but they weren't proud tears. They looked like grief. My father just sat there, staring at me like I was a stranger. I ended my speech by looking directly at them and saying, "To anyone who has ever been told you are not enough, you are. You always have been." The standing ovation that followed was thunderous. As I descended the stage, I saw my parents moving through the crowd toward me, looking smaller and more diminished than I had ever seen them. My father asked why I didn't tell them, his voice hoarse. I took a sip of water and asked him a simple question. "Did you ever ask?" This was the moment the stagnant asset became the most valuable person in the room. I had built my own table, and for the first time, I didn't care if there was a seat for them or not. If you were in my shoes, would you have invited them to your success after they abandoned you in your struggle? Comment yes if you would forgive them, or no if you would have walked away just like I did. And if you want to see the final showdown in the reception area, where my father realized the full weight of his mistake, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The final part of this journey is coming up next. The morning of May 17th arrived with a sky so blue and a sun so bright it felt almost ironic, a stark contrast to the dark, windowless basement room where I had spent the last few years grinding in silence. By 9 a.m., the university stadium was a sea of 3,000 people, a hum of excited voices, and a chaotic display of celebratory balloons and flowers. I arrived early, slipping through the faculty entrance to avoid the crowds. My regalia was the same black gown as the others, but across my shoulders lay the heavy gold sash of the valedictorian, and pinned to my chest was the bronze Whitfield Scholar medallion, its surface catching the morning light. I took my seat in the VIP section at the very front of the stage, an area reserved for honor students and speakers. Just 20 feet away, in the general graduate section, I could see Giselle taking selfies with her friends, completely unaware that her stagnant sister was sitting just out of her line of sight. But it was the front row of the audience that held my gaze. Dead center, in the best seats in the house, sat my parents. My father, Julian, was wearing his best Navy suit, the one he saved for high-value corporate events. My mother, Lydia, wore a cream-colored dress, a massive bouquet of roses resting in her lap. Between them sat an empty chair, likely meant for their coats or purses, but to me, it was a physical manifestation of the space I had never occupied in their lives. My father was fiddling with his camera, adjusting the settings with the precision of a professional, his lens already trained on the section where Giselle sat. They looked so happy, so proud, so convinced that today was a victory for the only child they had deemed worth the investment. Before I tell you the moment the air left that stadium, I have to ask, have you ever been the secret success in a room where people expected you to fail? Have you ever had a moment where you finally got to show the world who you really are? If you are cheering for Seraphina right now, hit that like button and type justice in the comments. I love seeing this community stand up for those who were overlooked. The ceremony began with the usual pageantry, the welcome address, the honorary degrees, the long list of acknowledgments that felt like they were stretching time. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, watching my parents. They were smiling and waving at Giselle, their cameras ready to capture every second of her walk across the stage. They had no idea the world was about to shift beneath their feet. Then, the university president returned to the podium. The crowd hushed. And now, he began, his voice booming through the speakers. It is my great honor to introduce this year's valedictorian and Whitfield Scholar, a student who has demonstrated extraordinary resilience, academic excellence, and a strength of character that humbles us all. In the front row, I saw my mother lean over to whisper something to my father. He nodded, his camera lens still pointed firmly at Giselle's section. Please join me in welcoming Seraphina Thorne. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. The silence was absolute. Then, I stood up. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned toward me as I walked toward the podium. I could hear the rhythmic click of my heels against the stage floor, the sound echoing in the stillness. The gold sash swayed with each step, and the Whitfield medallion gleamed against my chest. And then I saw it. I watched my parents' faces transform in real time. My father's hand froze on his camera, his finger hovering over the shutter. My mother's bouquet of roses slipped sideways, nearly falling to the floor. First came confusion. Who is that? Then came the recognition. Wait, is that Seraphina? And finally, the shock. A pale, stricken silence took over their faces as they realized their bad investment was standing at the highest point of the university hierarchy. I saw Giselle in the graduate section, her head snapping toward the stage, her jaw literally dropping as she mouthed my name. I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. The 3,000 people in the audience began to applaud, a thunderous sound that filled the stadium. But my parents didn't clap. They just sat there frozen, as if someone had pressed pause on their entire world. For the first time in my life, they weren't looking through me or past me. They were looking at me. I let the applause fade into a heavy, expectant silence. I leaned into the microphone, my voice steady and calm, echoing across the grass where I used to empty trash cans just a year ago. Good morning, everyone, I said. 4 years ago, I was told I wasn't worth the investment. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father's camera hung uselessly at his side. I was told to expect less from myself because others expected less from me. I continued, my voice amplified and steady as a heartbeat. So I learned to expect more. I spoke to those 3,000 people about the reality of the last 4 years. I didn't name names, and I didn't point fingers, but the truth was a weapon of its own. I spoke about working 3 jobs, about the 4 hours of sleep, about the instant ramen dinners, and the secondhand textbooks I had to borrow because I couldn't afford to buy them. I spoke about what it meant to build something from nothing, not because I wanted to prove anyone wrong, but because I needed to prove myself right. The greatest gift I received, I said, looking directly at the front row, wasn't financial support or encouragement. It was the chance to discover who I am without anyone else's validation. In the front row, my mother was crying. These weren't the proud, joyful tears people usually shed at graduations. This was something raw, something that looked like grief. My father remained motionless, staring at the podium as if he were seeing a stranger. And in a way, he was. He had never known the woman I had become. I finished my speech by looking out at the sea of graduates, the ones who had struggled, the parents who had actually sacrificed, and the friends like Rebecca who had believed. To anyone who has ever been told you're not enough, I paused, letting the words settle over the stadium. You are. You always have been. The standing ovation that followed was a roar of 3,000 people rising to their feet. I stepped back from the podium, my heart finally at peace. As I descended the stage, I saw the dean waiting for me, but my eyes were already moving toward the reception area. I knew the confrontation was coming. I knew they would try to explain, try to apologize, try to reclaim the asset they had thrown away. What would you say to your parents if they showed up at your biggest moment after telling you that you were worthless? Would you let them back in, or would you walk away? Comment the word boundaries if you think Seraphina should keep her distance. We are almost at the final chapter of this story, and you won't believe what happens when Julian tries to fix his mistake in the reception area. Subscribe now and hit the bell so you don't miss the conclusion to this journey. The reception area at Oak Ridge Academy was a blur of expensive perfume, clinking champagne flutes, and the low hum of self-congratulation. I stood there, still wearing my gold valedictorian sash, shaking hands with the dean and several high-profile board members. My heart was still racing from the speech, but my mind was laser-focused. I saw them before they saw me, Julian and Lydia, moving through the crowd like they were wading through deep water. My father reached me first. His face, usually so composed and authoritative, was a mask of confusion and something that looked dangerously like regret. Seraphina, he said, and his voice was hoarse, a sound I had never heard from him before. Why didn't you tell us? Why did we have to find out this way? I accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and took a slow, deliberate sip. I looked him dead in the eye, the same eyes that had once dismissed me as a stagnant asset, and asked a single question. Did you ever ask? He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stood there, frozen. My mother arrived beside him a moment later, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked at me and tried to reach for my arm, her voice trembling. Baby, I am so sorry. We didn't know. We truly didn't know it had come to this. Before I tell you my response to them, I want to pause and ask you a serious question. If you spent 4 years being treated like a ghost, would an apology at the finish line be enough to make you go back? Comment yes if you believe in second chances, or no if you think the damage is already done. I'm really curious to see where you stand on this. I stepped back, just an inch, out of my mother's reach. You knew, I said, my voice as even as a heartbeat. You chose not to see. There is a difference. Julian straightened his navy suit, trying to regain some of his old boardroom posture. That's not fair, Seraphina, he started, his tone shifting toward a lecture. We made some tough financial decisions, and perhaps I was too blunt, but fair? I interrupted him, and for the first time, a flicker of the old fire sparked in my eyes. You spent nearly $250,000 on Giselle's education and told me to figure it out myself because I wasn't special enough to warrant the investment. I spent 4 years working 3 jobs and sleeping in a windowless basement while you were taking family photos with an empty chair. Please, don't talk to me about what is fair. He flinched as if I had struck him. I realized in that moment that I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned away during those 4 a.m. shifts at the cafe. What was left was something much cleaner, much colder. Clarity. I am not the same person who left your house 4 years ago, I told them. You were right about one thing, Dad. I wasn't worth the investment. Not to you. But I was worth every sacrifice I made for myself. Just as the silence between us became suffocating, James Whitfield III, the founder of the Summit Fellowship, appeared at my elbow. He extended his hand, ignoring my parents entirely. Miss Thorne, that was a brilliant speech, he said, his voice full of genuine respect. The foundation is incredibly proud to have you as our representative. We're looking forward to seeing you in New York. He shook my hand warmly while my parents watched in stunned silence. Seeing the founder of one of the nation's most prestigious scholarships treat their worthless daughter like a treasure. I saw it hit them then. The full weight of what they had missed. The full weight of the person they had thrown away. After Mr. Whitfield moved on, my parents looked smaller, somehow diminished by the grandeur of the room. Julian stepped forward, his voice cracking for the first time in my life. Seraphina, please, come home for the summer. Let's just talk. Let us make this up to you. We can plan a trip, just the 3 of us, or all 4 of us. Whatever you want. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the gold sash on my shoulders. I have a job at Morrison & Associates in New York, I said. It's one of the top financial firms in the city. I start in 2 weeks. I won't be coming home. You're cutting us off? Just like that? Julian asked, looking lost. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected him. There is a difference. I don't want anything from you anymore. That's the point. I don't need your money, and I've realized I don't need your validation. I found that on my own. My mother started crying again. We love you, Seraphina. We've always loved you. Maybe, I said, and I meant it. But love isn't just a word you say when you're embarrassed at a graduation. It's the choices you make every day, and you made yours. Giselle appeared at the edge of our circle then, hovering uncertainly. She didn't have her usual smug glow. She looked at me, then at our parents, and whispered a quiet congratulations. I told her I'd call her sometime, if I felt like it. I wasn't going to be cruel, but I wasn't going to pretend the last 4 years didn't happen either. I turned and walked away, moving toward the exit where Dr. Margaret Smith was waiting with a quiet, knowing smile. As I left that reception hall, I didn't feel like I was escaping. I felt like I was finally moving forward into a life that I had built with my own two hands. 6 months later, I was standing in my own apartment in Manhattan. It was small, a studio overlooking a brick wall, but I had signed the lease with my own paycheck. I was working long hours, but every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who knew exactly what she was worth. My father calls sometimes. I don't always answer. When I do, it's on my terms. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about releasing your own grip on the pain. I'm not fully there yet, but I'm working on it. For me, not for them. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your own worth when the world tells you otherwise. And tell me in the comments, what is the one boundary you've set in your life that changed everything? I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can. Remember, you are enough. You always have been. 2 years have passed since I stood on that stage at Whitmore University, feeling the weight of the gold sash and the silence of my parents' shock. Today, my life looks nothing like the one they tried to design for me. I am no longer the girl scrubbing library floors at midnight or the twin being cropped out of family photos. I am now a senior associate at Morrison & Associates in the heart of Manhattan. I have been promoted twice, and this fall, I am starting my MBA at Columbia University with every cent of the tuition paid for by my firm. The girl who once survived on instant ramen and 4 hours of sleep would hardly recognize the woman I've become, but I carry her with me in everything I do. My success isn't just measured by my title or my paycheck. It's measured by the quiet, unshakable peace I feel when I wake up in my own apartment, the one I paid for myself. But the most difficult part of this journey wasn't the career climb. It was navigating the wreckage of the family I left behind. For a long time, I wondered if I would ever let them back in. I used to think love was a prize I had to win by being smart enough or successful enough. I spent years waiting for them to notice my worth, only to realize that the only person who'd notice it was me. Before I tell you how I finally began to heal and the boundaries I set to protect my new life, I want to ask you a question that might be hard to answer. Have you ever felt that your worth was tied to how someone else saw you? Like, if they didn't appreciate you, then you weren't valuable? If you've ever struggled with that, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us share these stories of strength with people who truly need to hear them. And please, tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally realized you were enough, regardless of what anyone else said? Reconnecting with my family didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It started with my sister, Giselle. We meet for coffee once a month now. It's awkward sometimes because we are learning how to be sisters as adults, something we never really were as children. At our last meeting, she looked at me across the table and finally said the words I had waited years to hear. She told me she was sorry she hadn't seen what was happening. She admitted she was so focused on what she was getting that she never stopped to ask what I was being denied. I told her the truth. I don't hate her for it. She didn't create the system we grew up in. She just benefited from it. That realization allowed me to see her as a person rather than just the favorite child, and it was the first step toward my own healing. Then there was my father, Julian. For years, I ignored his calls, but 6 months after graduation, I finally picked up. His voice sounded different, tired and stripped of the corporate arrogance he used to wear like armor. He didn't try to make excuses this time. He told me he was wrong about the money, about the way he treated me, and about the years he spent not calling or asking how I was. He told me he had failed as a father. When he asked how he could fix what he had broken, I had to be honest. I told him it wasn't my job to tell him how to fix it. I told him I wasn't promising a return to the way things were. No family dinners where we pretend everything is fine. But if he wanted to have an honest, real conversation without deflecting, I would listen. He laughed a small, broken sound and admitted I had always been the strong one. He was just too blind to see it. My parents even came to visit me in New York last month. It was uncomfortable and stilted. My father spent half the time apologizing, and my mother spent the other half crying. But they showed up. They came to my door in my city, in the life I built entirely without them. I'm still not ready to call us a family again because that word carries too much history. But we are working on something new, something based on the boundaries I have set. The most rewarding moment of this entire journey happened just a few weeks ago. I wrote a check for 10,000 USD to the Eastbrook State Scholarship Fund. It was an anonymous donation for students who have no family financial support. As I signed that check, I thought about Dr. Margaret Smith and the Whitfield Scholarship that saved me. I realized that my father's rejection didn't break me. It rebuilt me. It forced me to find a strength I never would have discovered if I had stayed in the shadow of their approval. If you are watching this and you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't worth the investment by the very people supposed to love you most, please listen to this. They were wrong. They were always wrong. Your worth is not a number on a check, it's not a seat at a table, and it's not your place in a family photo. Your worth exists whether or not a single person on this planet acknowledges it. You don't need anyone else to confirm what you already know. You are enough. You always have been. It is okay to protect yourself. It is okay to set boundaries. And it is okay to decide that your peace matters more than keeping a toxic peace with others. Thank you for staying until the end of my journey. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might be struggling to find their own worth today. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story of resilience and family drama. There are more incredible stories waiting for you in the description below, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Keep believing in yourself because you are the only investment that truly matters.